There is a moment in every person's life when the noise around them becomes so constant that they can no longer hear their own thoughts. Messages, opinions, expectations, conversations, comparisons, and the endless pressure to remain connected can create the illusion that being surrounded by people means being secure. But sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes you need distance from the crowd before you can understand yourself. This is why solitude can become one of the greatest teachers in your life. When you are always surrounded by people, it becomes easy to perform a version of yourself that others expect. You begin adjusting your opinions according to the room. You laugh because everyone else is laughing. You agree because disagreement might make you uncomfortable. You pursue certain goals because they impress people rather than because they matter to you. Gradually, without noticing, you can become more familiar with the person you show to others than with the person you actually are. Solitude removes that audience. When nobody is watching, who are you? That question is more important than it appears. If your confidence depends entirely on attention, what happens when the attention disappears? If your motivation depends on praise, what happens when nobody recognizes your effort? If your identity depends on belonging to a particular group, what happens when the group changes direction? Solitude exposes those dependencies. It gives you an opportunity to separate your genuine values from the expectations you have absorbed from other people. You begin to notice what you actually enjoy, what you actually believe, and what you actually want to accomplish. You may discover that some of the things you were chasing were never truly yours. This is not an argument against friendship or community. Human beings need meaningful relationships. The lesson is simply that relationships become healthier when they are chosen from strength rather than desperation. There is a difference between wanting someone's company and needing their company to feel complete. When you understand that difference, your relationships begin to change. You stop forcing conversations that have naturally ended. You stop chasing people who repeatedly show that they do not want to participate. You stop changing your personality simply to remain accepted. You become capable of enjoying someone's presence without becoming dependent on it. And strangely, this often makes your presence more meaningful. People can sense when someone is desperate to be accepted. The person constantly seeks reassurance, constantly checks whether others approve, constantly tries to remain relevant. Their attention is focused outward because they are uncertain internally. But someone who is comfortable alone carries a different energy. They don't need to dominate a conversation. They don't need to be the center of attention. They can listen, they can disagree. They can leave an environment that doesn't suit them without creating a dramatic scene. Their confidence is not dependent on the crowd. This kind of independence takes practice. At first, silence can feel uncomfortable. When you are accustomed to constant stimulation, being alone may force thoughts to surface that you normally avoid. You may suddenly notice your insecurities, unfinished goals, doubts, or frustration. That is why many people immediately reach for distraction. But if you stay with that discomfort long enough, something useful happens. You begin understanding yourself. You can examine your choices without needing someone else to tell you what they mean. You can think about where your life is going. You can identify habits that are helping you and habits that are holding you back. You can decide what deserves your attention and what no longer deserves it. Solitude becomes a workshop for the mind. This is where strong character is developed, not in applause, not in constant validation, but in the quiet moments when you have to decide what you will do without anyone watching. Will you continue working toward a goal when nobody knows about it? Will you keep a promise to yourself when there is no external reward? Will you choose discipline when distraction is easier? Will you admit that something in your life needs to change? These decisions reveal character, and the more often you make them, the more you begin trusting yourself. Self-trust is one of the most important foundations of confidence. When you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort, make decisions, and follow through on your commitments, you become less dependent on external approval. You don't need everyone to tell you that you're doing well because you know whether you are honoring your own standards. That doesn't mean you become arrogant. In fact, genuine self-knowledge often makes a person more humble. When you spend enough time alone, you begin seeing your own strengths and weaknesses more honestly. You stop needing to maintain a perfect image because you understand that growth requires admitting where you are imperfect. Solitude also teaches you that not every absence is a loss. Some people leave your life because relationships change. Some friendships naturally fade. Some environments stop matching the person you are becoming. This can feel painful, but it can also create space for growth. The mistake is assuming that being alone automatically means something is wrong. Sometimes being alone means you are between chapters. Sometimes it means you are protecting your direction. Sometimes it means you are learning what you actually want before inviting new people into your life. The goal is not to become isolated from everyone. The goal is to become comfortable enough with yourself that you never have to betray your values simply to avoid being alone, because once you reach that point, your relationships become choices instead of necessities. You can walk into a room without needing everyone to approve of you. You can leave a room without fearing that you will be forgotten, and you can spend time alone without feeling incomplete. Solitude does not make you stronger because you have nobody around you. It makes you stronger because you discover that your identity does not disappear when the crowd does. Learn to stand alone long enough to hear your own mind, and you will become far more deliberate about who you allow into your life. There is a point where you must stop asking whether people want you around and start asking whether they deserve a place in your life. This distinction can change the way you approach friendship, connection, and even your own sense of worth. Too many people spend enormous amounts of energy pursuing those who have already demonstrated that they are not interested in giving the same effort in return. They send another message, they initiate another conversation, they keep offering help, they keep trying to prove their loyalty, and every time the response is weak, inconsistent, or dismissive, they increase their effort instead of stepping back. But more effort does not always create more value. Sometimes it simply makes the imbalance more obvious. A strong person learns to recognize reciprocity. This does not mean keeping a scorecard of every conversation or expecting every relationship to be perfectly equal. People have difficult days. Sometimes one person needs more support. Sometimes one person is busy while the other has more time. Healthy relationships naturally fluctuate. The important thing is the pattern. Over time, does the other person show interest in your life? Do they make an effort to communicate? Do they respect your time? Do they remember the things that matter to you? Do they show up when they can? Do they make you feel that the relationship is mutual rather than something you have to constantly maintain by yourself? These questions reveal more than temporary attention ever could. One of the most damaging habits is chasing someone simply because they are difficult to reach. Scarcity can create obsession, and obsession can easily be mistaken for connection. You may begin thinking about someone constantly because they rarely give you attention. Every small response feels unusually important. A short message becomes exciting because you've been waiting so long for it. You begin measuring your worth by how much attention you can eventually extract from them. But this is not necessarily connection. It may simply be uncertainty. When you recognize that, you become less vulnerable to the cycle of chasing and disappointment. You stop assuming that difficult access means greater value. You begin looking at the quality of the relationship rather than the intensity of your desire for it. This is where self-respect becomes practical. Self-respect means accepting that you cannot force mutual interest. You can be kind, you can communicate, you can make an effort. But after you have made your interests clear, you must allow the other person to make their own choice. If they move toward you, you can meet them there. If they repeatedly move away, you don't need to keep running after them. This does not require anger. It does not require revenge. It does not require making a dramatic announcement that you are done. Sometimes the strongest response is simply to stop investing energy where there is no meaningful return. Your life continues. That is the key. Many people believe that stepping back means losing. They think, if I stop trying, they will forget me. But consider what that thought reveals. It means your connection depends entirely on your constant effort. If you must continually remind someone that you exist, then the relationship may already be telling you something important. A healthy relationship should not require one person to constantly chase the other into participation. This principle also applies to friendships. You may have a friend who only contacts you when they need something. Every conversation revolves around their problems. They rarely ask how you are doing. They disappear when you need support and return when they want something. You might spend months explaining their behavior because you don't want to accept what the pattern suggests. But patterns deserve attention. You don't have to label someone as a bad person. You don't have to create conflict. You simply recognize that the relationship may not be balanced, and you adjust your investment accordingly. This is a powerful form of emotional intelligence, matching your investment to reality. Give more where there is genuine mutual effort. Give less where there is repeated indifference. And don't confuse compassion with obligation. You can care about someone without being responsible for maintaining the entire relationship. You can wish someone well without continuing to pursue them. You can appreciate what a friendship once meant without forcing it to remain exactly the same forever. People change, priorities change, circumstances change. Some relationships grow stronger while others naturally fade. Trying to hold every relationship in place can prevent you from making room for healthier connections. There is also an important lesson about attention. When you stop chasing people who don't value your presence, you recover attention that can be invested elsewhere. You can put that energy into learning, creating, improving your skills, spending time with people who genuinely care, or simply developing a stronger relationship with yourself. Your attention is not unlimited. Where you place it shapes your life. This is why strong people become selective. They are not necessarily surrounded by hundreds of people. They may have a smaller circle, but the relationships within that circle carry greater meaning because they are built on mutual respect. And being selective does not mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means observing before investing deeply. Give relationships time to reveal themselves. Don't immediately give unlimited access to someone simply because you enjoy their attention. Let trust develop through consistent behavior. At the same time, don't demand perfection. Nobody will communicate perfectly all the time. Everyone makes mistakes. The question is whether there is a willingness to repair, communicate, and improve. That is what separates temporary imbalance from a permanently one-sided relationship. If someone makes a mistake and takes responsibility, there is room for growth. If someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries and expects you to keep chasing them, the pattern is different. Learn to recognize the difference. And when the evidence becomes clear, accept it without bitterness. You don't need to convince someone to value you. You don't need to compete for a place in someone's life. You don't need to chase a person who has already shown you that they are walking in another direction. Strong people understand that walking away from one-sided relationships is not a rejection of connection. It is a commitment to healthier connection. Stop chasing people who continually make you question your worth and start investing where respect and effort naturally move in both directions. Your environment is quietly shaping you every day, whether you notice it or not. The people around you influence what you consider normal, what you tolerate, what you pursue, and even what you believe is possible. You may think you are completely independent, that other people's attitudes cannot affect you, but human beings naturally absorb patterns from their surroundings. Spend enough time around constant negativity, and negativity can begin to feel normal. Spend enough time around people who mock ambition, and eventually you may begin hiding your own ambition. Spend enough time in environments where conflict is everywhere and peace can start to feel strange. This is why powerful people become selective about their environment. They understand that protecting their energy is not selfish. It is necessary. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every conversation requires some of it. Every conflict consumes some of it. Every relationship carries an emotional cost, whether positive or negative. If you constantly give your attention to gossip, arguments, complaints, and unnecessary drama, you have less attention available for the things that actually move your life forward. The question is not simply, who is around me? The better question is, what happens to me when I am around them? Do you become more focused or more distracted, more confident or more doubtful, more peaceful or constantly defensive, more ambitious or more comfortable with doing nothing? These questions reveal the quality of your environment. This does not mean you should abandon anyone who is struggling. Everyone experiences difficult periods. A friend may be having a bad week, a family member may be under pressure, someone you care about may need support. Compassion is important, but there is a difference between supporting someone through a temporary difficulty and allowing a permanently destructive pattern to consume your life. You can care without absorbing everything. You can listen without becoming responsible for fixing every problem. You can offer support without allowing someone else's chaos to become your identity. This distinction becomes especially important with people who constantly create conflict. They may turn every small issue into an argument. They may gossip about everyone around them. They may encourage you to dislike people you barely know. They may constantly complain but reject every possible solution. Over time, being around this behavior can influence your own thinking. You begin discussing problems more than possibilities. You begin expecting conflict. You begin assuming negative intentions. You begin spending more time reacting than creating. And slowly your environment becomes your mental habit. This is why protecting your energy begins with awareness. Notice what conversations repeatedly dominate your life. Notice what topics leave you drained. Notice which people encourage you to become better and which interactions consistently pull you toward frustration. You don't need to judge people as good or bad. You simply need to recognize compatibility. Not everyone belongs in the same level of your life. Some people may be friendly acquaintances, some may be trusted friends, some may be people you respect but only interact with occasionally, and some may require significant distance because the relationship repeatedly damages your peace or violates your boundaries. Healthy social intelligence involves understanding these different levels. You do not have to give everyone equal access. This is not about becoming arrogant or isolated. In fact, a healthy environment usually includes people who challenge you, support you, teach you, and occasionally disagree with you. You should not surround yourself only with people who tell you that everything you do is perfect. Growth requires honest feedback. The important distinction is whether the environment challenges you constructively or constantly tears you down. A good friend can tell you that you made a mistake without trying to humiliate you. A good mentor can challenge your thinking without making you feel worthless. A healthy relationship can include disagreement without turning every disagreement into a personal attack. That is the kind of environment that strengthens you. There's another mistake people make, waiting until they are completely exhausted before creating distance. They tolerate the same negative pattern repeatedly because they fear being perceived as rude. But boundaries become harder to establish when resentment has already accumulated. It is better to recognize patterns early. If a conversation consistently becomes disrespectful, redirect it. If someone repeatedly pressures you to participate in behavior that conflicts with your values, say no. If an environment constantly distracts you from important responsibilities, limit your time there. If a relationship repeatedly becomes harmful despite reasonable attempts to improve communication, consider creating greater distance and seek appropriate support when necessary. You don't need to make every change dramatically. Sometimes small adjustments are enough. Spend less time in unproductive conversations, spend more time learning, reduce exposure to constant negativity, choose activities that build your confidence and skills, spend time with people who respect your boundaries. These small decisions compound. Your environment doesn't only affect your mood, it can influence your expectations. If everyone around you believes that success is impossible, you may eventually stop trying. If everyone treats dishonesty as normal, your own standards may gradually weaken. If everyone constantly seeks distraction, discipline can begin to feel unusual. But the opposite is also true. Spend time around people who take responsibility, and responsibility becomes normal. Spend time around people who learn, and learning becomes normal. Spend time around people who pursue meaningful goals, and ambition becomes less intimidating. You begin to see possibilities that your previous environment never showed you. This is why strong people protect the spaces where their minds develop. They understand that solitude can sometimes be healthier than bad company. Being alone for a period may feel uncomfortable, but being surrounded by people who consistently pull you away from your values can be far more costly. Still, the goal is not permanent isolation. The goal is intentional connection. Choose people who allow you to remain yourself while encouraging you to grow. Choose environments where respect is mutual. Choose conversations that leave you clearer rather than constantly confused. And when you encounter negativity, learn to decide how much access it deserves. Your life is partly the result of what you repeatedly expose yourself to. Protect your environment because what surrounds your mind eventually becomes part of the way your mind works. Before you can build a strong circle, you must first build the person who enters that circle. This is where many people make a fundamental mistake. They spend years searching for the right friends, the right connections, the right environment, and the right people to support them, while neglecting the development of their own character. They want better relationships, but they have not yet developed the discipline, confidence, or direction required to maintain them. Your first responsibility is not to find your people. It is to become someone you respect when you are alone. When you have a clear sense of who you are becoming, your relationships change naturally. You stop choosing people simply because they give you attention. You stop accepting every invitation because you are afraid of being left out. You stop changing your personality to fit whatever group happens to surround you. Instead, you begin evaluating relationships according to whether they support the person you are trying to become. This is why purpose matters. A person without direction can become overly dependent on social approval because other people's opinions provide a temporary sense of identity. But when you have meaningful goals, your attention has somewhere important to go. You have something to build, something to learn, something to improve, something that requires patience. Solitude then becomes productive rather than frightening. You can spend an evening working on a skill without feeling that you are missing out. You can study when everyone else is distracted. You can practice something repeatedly without needing anyone to applaud you. You can make progress privately and allow the results to speak later. This is how self-respect develops. Not through thinking about yourself as superior to others, but through repeatedly keeping promises to yourself. If you tell yourself that you will learn something, learn it. If you decide to improve a skill, practice it. If you recognize a habit that is damaging your progress, work on changing it. Every time you follow through, you create evidence that you can trust yourself, and self-trust changes the way you enter relationships. You no longer need another person to constantly reassure you that you are capable. You can accept encouragement without depending on it. You can receive criticism without feeling that your identity is being attacked. You can admit when you are wrong because being wrong does not destroy your sense of self. This creates a different kind of confidence. It is quieter. It does not require constant display. You don't need to tell everyone about your ambitions because you are busy working toward them. You don't need to announce every improvement because the process itself matters more than the applause. You don't need to prove that you are disciplined because your habits demonstrate it. This also helps you choose better relationship. When you know what matters to you, certain environments become obviously incompatible. You may discover that you cannot spend all your time around people who constantly discourage growth. You may realize that certain conversations repeatedly pull you toward negativity. You may recognize that some friendships are based primarily on convenience rather than mutual respect. The answer is not to hate those people. The answer is to make wiser choices about your time. You can respect someone without copying their habits. You can care about someone without following their direction. You can appreciate someone's company while recognizing that your paths are different. This is an important part of maturity. Understanding that connection does not require imitation. You don't have to become a different person to belong. You don't have to abandon your ambitions to keep a friendship. You don't have to lower your standards simply because the people around you have different standards. At the same time, don't use independence as an excuse for arrogance. There is a dangerous version of solitude where a person begins believing that they need nobody because they consider themselves better than everyone else. That is not strength. It is another form of insecurity. Real independence allows you to learn from others. You can listen to someone younger than you. You can accept advice from someone with more experience. You can admit that another person has a skill you haven't developed. You can ask for help without feeling weak. The strongest person is not the person who knows everything. It is the person secure enough to recognize what they don't know. This is why building yourself must include both competence and humility. Develop your abilities, but remain teachable. Develop confidence, but remain open to correction. Develop independence, but don't reject meaningful connection. Develop ambition, but don't allow ambition to destroy your character. When you work on yourself consistently, something interesting happens. You become less desperate for company because your own life has substance. You have interests to explore, responsibilities to handle, goals to pursue, and ideas to think about. Being alone no longer automatically feels like rejection. It becomes space. And that space allows you to choose relationships more carefully. You don't ask, who will accept me? You begin asking, who brings something healthy into my life and what can I bring into theirs? That is a completely different question. One comes from insecurity. The other comes from self-respect. Your goal should never be to become so independent that you don't need anyone. Human beings grow through cooperation, friendship, mentorship, family, and community. The goal is to become strong enough that you can participate in those relationships without losing yourself inside them. Build yourself first, then build your circle from a position of choice rather than desperation. Because when you become comfortable with who you are becoming, you stop searching for people to complete you and start choosing people who genuinely complement your direction. There is a difference between being independent and becoming emotionally closed. A person can learn to stand alone, protect their time, and stop chasing approval, yet still make the mistake of believing that strength requires rejecting everyone. But true independence does not mean building walls around yourself. It means knowing that you can connect with people without losing your identity. This distinction matters because solitude, when misunderstood, can become isolation. You may begin by choosing to spend more time alone so you can think clearly and develop yourself. That can be healthy. But if you turn that experience into a belief that everyone is untrustworthy, everyone is a distraction, or needing people is a weakness, you have moved from independence into defensiveness. Real strength leaves room for connection. You can enjoy friendship without becoming dependent on it. You can care about people without allowing their opinions to control every decision you make. You can accept support without believing that you are incapable of standing on your own. You can belong to a group without surrendering your values simply to remain accepted. This is the balance that many people never learn. They either become completely dependent on others or completely disconnected from them. One person cannot tolerate being alone while another refuses to let anyone close. Both positions can come from fear. The first fear is abandonment. The second fear is vulnerability. A stronger position exists between them. You can say, I value you, but I am still responsible for myself. That sentence represents emotional independence. When you understand it, relationships become less complicated. You no longer expect another person to solve every problem for you. You don't expect friends to constantly reassure you. You don't demand that everyone agree with your decisions. At the same time, you don't pretend that you don't care. You care without surrendering yourself. This becomes especially important when your values are challenged by the group around you. There will be moments when everyone else wants to go in one direction and you believe another direction is better for you. The easy choice is to follow the group because disagreement can feel uncomfortable. But belonging has a hidden price when it requires you to abandon yourself. If you constantly change your opinions, habits, or goals simply to remain accepted, eventually you may realize that you have built relationships with people who don't actually know you. They know the version of yourself you created to fit in. Strong people learn to tolerate the discomfort of being different. They don't need to announce their independence dramatically. They simply make decisions according to their values and accept that not everyone will understand them. This does not mean refusing advice. In fact, independence requires the ability to hear advice without automatically obeying it or rejecting it. Someone can offer you an opinion and you can consider it carefully. You can take what is useful and leave what isn't. Your final decision remains yours. That is intellectual independence. The same principle applies to criticism. If someone tells you that you made a mistake, you don't have to immediately become defensive. You can ask whether the criticism contains something useful. If it does, learn from it. If it doesn't, let it go. Your identity does not need to collapse every time someone disagrees with you. That is another benefit of being comfortable alone. You become less dependent on unanimous approval. You begin understanding that disagreement is not automatically rejection. Two people can respect each other while seeing the world differently. Two friends can have different ambitions. Two people can care about each other while needing different amounts of space. Healthy relationships do not require identical personalities. They require mutual respect. This is why strong people don't necessarily have huge social circles. They often prefer depth over quantity. A few genuine relationships can provide more value than dozens of shallow connections. The goal is not to collect people. The goal is to develop relationships where both people can be honest, supportive, and independent. In those relationships, you don't have to perform. You can say when you are tired. You can admit when you don't know something. You can acknowledge when you made a mistake. You can ask for help. You can also say no. That combination is important because healthy connection requires both openness and boundaries. If you never allow anyone to help you, you may deprive yourself of valuable perspective. If you allow everyone to control you, you lose your independence. The balance is to accept connection without surrendering responsibility for your own life. There will also be times when someone you trusted disappoints you. That experience can tempt you to close yourself off completely. You may think, I will never trust anyone again, but one person's behavior should not become the rule for everyone. Instead, learn, observe patterns, develop better boundaries. Take time before giving trust, but don't punish future relationships for the mistakes of past ones. Strength is not becoming incapable of being hurt. Strength is becoming capable of responding wisely when disappointment happens. You can protect yourself without becoming bitter. You can be cautious without becoming cynical. You can be independent without becoming isolated. And you can walk alone when necessary while still appreciating the people who genuinely deserve a place beside you. The strongest person is not the one who says, I need nobody. It is the person who can say, I can stand on my own, but I value the right people. That is the difference between loneliness and chosen solitude, between isolation and independence, between emotional walls and healthy boundaries. Stand firmly in your own identity, but never confuse strength with closing the door to meaningful human connection. There comes a time when solitude has done its work, and you must ask yourself what you are going to do with the clarity it gave you. Walking alone can teach you discipline, self-knowledge, independence, and patience. But solitude should never become an identity that you are afraid to leave. The purpose of stepping away is not to disappear from the world. It is to return to the world with better judgment about who belongs beside you. This is where many people misunderstand strength. They believe that once they become comfortable alone, they must remain alone. They turn independence into a permanent philosophy. They begin saying that they don't need friends, don't need advice, don't need anyone's support. At first, this may feel powerful, but eventually isolation can become another kind of limitation. A strong person does not walk alone because people are unnecessary. A strong person walks alone when necessary because they refuse to let fear decide who accompanies them. There is a major difference. Sometimes you need distance because a relationship has become unhealthy. Sometimes you need silence because your environment is distracting you from your goals. Sometimes you need to step away because you have become too dependent on other people's opinions. During these periods, solitude can restore your perspective, but once you have regained that perspective, you should be able to recognize the people who genuinely deserve a place in your life. The goal is not to reject connection. The goal is to choose it wisely. Imagine someone who spends years alone building discipline and confidence. They become capable of handling problems independently. They stop chasing approval. They learn to enjoy their own company. All of this is valuable. But if they eventually decide that trusting anyone is weakness, they have allowed solitude to become another form of fear. They are no longer choosing to be alone. They are hiding behind being alone. That distinction matters. True independence means you can connect without becoming dependent. You can trust without becoming careless. You can accept help without believing that you are incapable. You can care about someone while still maintaining your own values and direction. When the right people appear, you should not be too proud to let them in. A good friendship can challenge your thinking. A good mentor can help you recognize weaknesses you could not see by yourself. A trustworthy person can provide perspective when your own emotions make a situation difficult to understand. A healthy relationship can remind you that strength does not require carrying everything alone. This is why the final stage of solitude is selection. After learning who you are, you become more careful about who you invite into your life. You no longer choose people simply because they are available. You choose people because their presence adds something meaningful. Maybe they challenge you to grow. Maybe they encourage you when things become difficult. Maybe they tell you the truth when you would rather hear something comfortable. Maybe they respect your boundaries. Maybe they allow you to be yourself without demanding that you perform for their approval. These relationships are worth protecting. At the same time, you should not expect every relationship to last forever. Some people are important for a particular chapter and then naturally move in another direction. This does not necessarily mean betrayal. Life changes. People develop different priorities. Circumstances shift. A mature person learns to appreciate a relationship without demanding that it remain exactly the same forever. This is another reason why walking alone can be valuable. When you are comfortable with yourself, you don't have to hold on to people out of fear. You can appreciate what they brought into your life and accept when the relationship changes. You don't have to turn every ending into an enemy. You don't have to chase someone simply because they are leaving. You can allow people to make their own choices while continuing to make yours. This creates a healthier form of connection because neither person is trapped. There is also something powerful about returning to people after a period of solitude. You may notice that you listen differently. You no longer enter conversations desperately looking for approval. You don't need to be the center of attention. You can disagree without becoming defensive. You can appreciate someone else's strength without feeling threatened by them. You become capable of standing beside someone without needing to stand above them. That is maturity. The strongest relationships are not built between two people who are incomplete and desperately trying to complete each other. They are built between people who can stand independently and still choose to cooperate, support, and grow together. This is why the phrase walk alone should never be interpreted as live without everyone. It means something deeper. It means that when the crowd moves in a direction that violates your values, you can choose your own path. When a relationship repeatedly damages your peace, you can step away. When nobody understands your goal, you can continue working. When approval disappears, you can still respect yourself. But when you encounter people who genuinely respect you, challenge you constructively, and contribute something meaningful to your life, you should have the wisdom to recognize their value. Do not reject good people simply because you have learned to be independent. Independence should give you better relationships, not eliminate relationships entirely. And this is where the entire journey comes together. First, learn to be comfortable in solitude. Then stop chasing people who don't value your presence. Protect your energy. Build yourself before searching for a larger circle. Learn to stand alone without becoming cold. And finally, understand when solitude has served its purpose and when it is time to reconnect. You are not required to choose between strength and connection. You can have both. Walk alone when the path demands it. But when you find people who genuinely deserve to walk beside you, have the wisdom to let them.